Und in dem Moment dieses vollkommenen Glücks,
And in that moment of complete happiness, he ordered me back into my body, shot me back, I have to say. From today's perspective, it all happened in a single moment. And yet, in that moment, he also gave me the certainty, I will always be with you. And then I opened my eyes when the emergency doctor hit me on the left and right cheeks. I opened my eyes and the first thing I said was, I have seen the Lord.
Mr. Wölk, it was an evening in 2009, a boozy evening in a pub, as you described it in the preparation for this interview. You were in the pub with an acquaintance, you were dancing wildly, regardless of consequences, so to speak. And then something happened that, looking back, fundamentally changed your life. Please tell us what happened back then. First of all, the external events.
Yes, as you said, it was an evening, and it went as it often did for me at that time. You went for a drink from one pub to another. I often had the feeling that I couldn't get enough. It was a very excessive time. And I was already quite drunk that evening, changed pubs and met a friend in another pub. I had already heard from outside that they were playing nice German hits. I was drawn straight into this pub. And it was quite a small pub, maybe 4 tables, 5 tables and a bar, and maybe 2 by 3 meters in the middle. So I went in and asked a friend if he wouldn't like to dance with me. It was such great music. And he didn't really want to at first, but then I persuaded him. And then we had another beer. We drank bottled beer in the pub and toasted each other. And then I wanted him to spin me to the music too. And that's what he did. Incidentally, it was a guy with only one eye, and he only had 2 fingers on his right hand. Half of the others were missing. He lost them once when he was younger because he had been playing with kindling or something similar. So he held me with his hand and twisted, and we laughed. And from this twist, it was a very strong twist, an exaggerated twist, you could say. From this twist, he let me slip out of his hand. And I spun out and headed straight through the pub towards a rustic oak table and hit it head-on with my left eyebrow. That's when it happened. I was no longer in my body. I was out of my body. So it started with the impact. I found myself above the bar in the top right-hand corner of the pub and didn't even realize that anything had happened. So it was quite strange. I felt good, absolutely no longer drunk. I was very clear in my consciousness, and I was who I am now. So I was completely the same person.
Looking back, you never lost consciousness, but simply found yourself in a different position, right?
Yes, exactly. And I was only taken aback when I realized that I could now hear what people were thinking. I could hear what everyone in the pub was thinking. That really surprised me, because I thought, what's going on now? They're not moving their mouths at all, and I can hear what they're saying. I hear them talking, and they don't talk at all. That's how I have to put it.
And what were they thinking?
Some, the ladies at the round table, thought that's no way to behave. In the past, people like that would have been locked up. They thought something like that. They really thought badly of me. I don't really want to go into details now. And the young woman behind the counter who served us that evening, a blonde, young 28-year-old, she kept thinking, why with me? Geez, Harry, what am I supposed to do? Why with me? And she kept scrolling around excitedly on her mobile phone. And then I thought, what's she so upset about? I'm doing so wonderfully. I felt really wonderful. And the other person who let me slip out of his hand laughed his head off. Yes, you could say that. He thought it was terribly funny and kept saying or thinking, he's gone, he's dead. He probably thought it. Nobody tried to resuscitate me or help me. And I didn't even realize at the time that it was me. It was only when I realized the commotion, that there was someone lying on the floor, I thought, oh, there's someone lying on the floor. And then I sort of floated down from the upper ceiling to the floor, to the person lying there, and really shot backwards a meter, and then realized that it was me. So, of course, I recognized myself, and I thought, he looks really shit. So that's exactly what I thought.
Have you seen any blood?
No, it was a small cut above the eyebrows, right through them and a little above them. It was a burst cut, actually like a knife cut. And it wasn't a pool of blood or anything like that. And I was white as chalk, looked like a corpse. If you saw a person lying there like that, you'd say, he's dead. So I looked dead. And the woman at the counter thought I looked dead too. That's why she didn't resuscitate me. However, she only told me that afterwards. It was clear to me that there was a dead body lying there. And that's why she didn't want to do mouth-to-mouth resuscitation or anything else. It was very clear to her. And I didn't realize that at all, because I felt more alive than I had for a long time. And also very healthy, and as I said, absolutely sober. And so I saw that I was lying there, and then I said to myself, now you've done it, now you're dead. And with these words, I realized for myself that I was dead and no longer in my body.
Has this changed anything for you?
It was like this. From the moment I realized that I was out of my body, that I was dead, this body lying on the floor no longer touched me at all. It was like a newspaper lying on the floor. The body was of absolutely no interest to me. I was rather happy to be rid of him. It really was like that. I wasn't interested. Dead is dead. You don't want to go back into your body. And the next moment, I moved through the pub wall, through the wall, not of my own accord, but it was like a train. I was pulled through and then found myself in a kind of shadow world. It was a world that was black and white, more black than grey. There was smoking, there was drinking. It was more of a chilled atmosphere, and it was no longer earthly.
So nothing that you knew from earthly life?
No, it was a different realm. It was an otherworldly realm. But I didn't know that at the time, because I didn't recognize it. But I saw people, figures, people who were smoking, indulging in pleasures, just like in life. And then a voice came from some direction, from where I can't say. that clearly said to me, "Do you want to stay here?" And then it came shooting out of me very quickly. No, absolutely not, because it was too cool and too gloomy for me there. I wouldn't have felt comfortable there, even though I liked to drink and smoked a lot myself.
So the atmosphere was somehow familiar to you.
Yes, but I couldn't imagine staying there now. Somehow it didn't work. From within, from my deepest inner soul came the decision that I didn't want to stay there. But I didn't know what would come next. Otherwise, I might have decided differently, because after that came absolute darkness. So I found myself in absolute darkness. It was black, a black like I had never seen before. The darkest night ever wasn't this dark, as bleak as this environment.
What feelings did you have?
The feelings were being lost, being timelessly lost. I also thought that I wasn't walking, just turning circles, rolling like a ball, moving through the void somehow. I couldn't see any movement because I couldn't see anything.
So it wasn't a consciously controlled movement?
No, I didn't know whether I was going forwards or backwards or sideways. It was just nothing, nothing at all. I was moving in this nothingness, and there was no sense of time. There was absolutely nothing. It felt like infinity. That made me very, very frightened and desperate. I was really desperate inside. I was in the void, and I can't say how long that lasted. I only know that this great despair inside me grew stronger and stronger. There was nothing and nobody to see, to hear, to smell, absolutely nothing at all. And out of this nothingness, I suddenly heard, as if it was kilometers away, a small whimper, or beep, something. Then I focused on this something, because that's when I realized there is something. Something is there, but I didn't know what it was. And this moaning and whimpering came closer. But then I realized that it was coming from myself, that I was only aware of my own whining. And now this whining disappointed me even more. It was me. The whining came from my life, from times when I felt bad and was immersed in self-pity, and then drank out of sheer frustration and pity for myself, and drank even more. It was exactly this moaning that I heard. There was nothing else. And that really scared me. I practically died again at that moment, and then thought, now you're really finished. It's all over.
This means that you suddenly perceived peculiarities from within yourself as if from the outside.
Exactly. Traits from my life. The moaning had nothing to do with the current situation. It stemmed from previous situations. And that was frightening because I hadn't expected it. I couldn't have imagined that there was absolutely nothing, that there was simply nothing at all. But at the same time, I am still who I am. That was the low point for me. But then, somehow, deep inside me, something reared up again.
You had not resigned yourself to it.
Exactly. Everything that was left of me, and there really wasn't much left, everything screamed from my soul. There was only my soul. And then I shouted out of sheer desperation. "Jesus Christ," I shouted. "Surely it couldn't have been that." That's exactly what I shouted, really. And so the journey continued. At first, it was still a case of rotating through the void. But then suddenly, in one moment, I thought, I've changed my direction. If you can't see anything and don't know which way is up and which way is down, you can't really definitely recognize such a thing. But it was like a hunch. Something had changed. I didn't know exactly what, but it was the direction that had changed, and I was no longer drifting forwards, but backwards. How long that took? I can't give any timescales. It felt like an eternity. And suddenly I noticed a bright glow towards the rear and around me.
The way you felt it. Did this experience last seconds or years?
I can't say that either. It simply was what it was. There are no minutes and there are no years. It's all infinite. You can't describe it in units of time. And everything happens at the same time.
But this experience was certainly not a temporary flash, but a very intense experience, right?
Yes, it was a very intense experience. It doesn't just pass you by, it goes right through you, and you experience everything very intensely. As if there is nothing else at that moment when you're experiencing the situation. Everything is now and timeless. I saw a bright light behind me, a glow coming over me from behind. And then I turned over to the right and froze. There was a bright gate of light in front of me. It was huge. I like to describe it as a huge stadium gate, so curved at the top, downwards to the left and right, a curved gate of enormous dimensions, perhaps 30 meters high and 50 meters wide. I can hardly estimate it. It was huge. And there was a wall of light, a golden, yellow-golden light. I then simply floated through. I simply broke through this wall of light and found myself on the other side of the light. And then I was just in the light. Until then, I had still felt inner despair because of the nothingness, the darkness that I had experienced. And from that moment on, I was suddenly in this light. It was a surprising turn of events. I myself was tall. I felt very tall. I was floating in the air. It was only at that moment that I realized I was floating. I wasn't walking at all. I was floating.
And the feeling of spinning was over.
That was the end. I stood in the air, but above the other souls that were below me. They stepped forward with outstretched arms. One came forward. There were many souls, at least hundreds. But one of them stepped forward, turned to me and said, "You're finally here. We've been waiting for you for so long." And with a love and a warmth that then flowed over to me, directly into me, that was so strong that I couldn't even comprehend it. I had gone from one extreme situation to another. I couldn't believe that the affection was for me. I had never experienced so much love, so much light, so much warmth, so much affection in my life. It's hard to describe. It was bliss, it was love, it was light. Everything that was light was also love at that moment. Today I can call it that. Today I would say, you breathe love. What you breathe as oxygen here on earth is love there. It is everything. Light and love. There is nothing other than light. There are different nuances of light, but no shadows and no darkness, nothing like that. Just different colours of light, from golden yellow light to bright white light. Light shining in different colours. For me, that was the entrance area.
Was this experience something simply overwhelmingly new for you? Or did you have the impression that you were already familiar with such feelings, that you were somehow back home now?
At the time, I just found it overwhelming. I had never experienced, received, or felt so much love from anyone in my entire life. It was so strong that I couldn't comprehend it at all. I was just blown away. I was just happy and overwhelmed by this light, this warm, wonderful light. And all these souls, these beings of light, who were once human too, shone so wonderfully. You can feel and perceive every single one of the souls. If 100 souls are standing in front of you, you can perceive how each soul is feeling at that moment. That is unimaginable. There is not a single soul that feels bad or is negatively charged, but each one is in a blissful mood, in a joyful state, full of love, full of happiness. And this experience hits you with a bang. That's what I'm going to call it now, because we don't know it like that. As humans, we can perhaps perceive what the atmosphere is like in a room that we enter and where there are many others. If they are radiating bad energies, then we perceive this and think there is a strange atmosphere there. And that's exactly how you perceive the souls, only 1,000 times more intensely. It is simply overwhelming. From this area, I was then pulled forwards, over these souls and into a cube of light. It was a very bright white light. It was square, without walls, but like a room. There was no door. I was simply pulled in through this wall of light. I couldn't have resisted, and then found myself in this white, bright light. Even in this very bright white light, it was impossible for me to recognize whether anyone was still there or what was there, whether anything was there. There was only white light, but I knew I was in a room now. And then I also felt a presence. There was an entity present, perhaps a spirit guide, an entity with a very deep, masculine voice, and it spoke to me. So, everything happens telepathically there. You don't speak with your mouth like here. And the question I asked this being of light, which came shooting out of me over and over again, perhaps 50 or 60 times in a row, was, do I really have the right to be here? I asked that again and again, and at the same time, the answer came back from this presence, which I perceived as a deep voice. It consistently said, yes, you have the right to be here. The quicker I asked, the quicker the voice answered. That was really nice. At some point, it became a certainty to me. I realized it after 50 or 60 repetitions. Yes, I really do have the right to be here. That made me really happy. And from that moment on, I thought, wow, I've arrived home. It's nice here. And yet I asked again, why? And the voice told me, you've earned it. But I didn't realize how or by what means. I only heard very clearly, you have earned it. I didn't know how that came about, but it was no longer my question. I had realized I was really allowed to stay here, and that made me happy. And only then did I leave the cube of light again. I was simply led out to the front, like when you walk through the front door and step out onto the street. And standing in front of this cube were all the other shining golden souls. And they were all happy with me that I was allowed to stay. There was great general joy. It was a celebration, you could say. Everyone was overjoyed that Harry was allowed to stay.
In your experience, did you really still have this self-image of being Harry?
Yes, the person sitting here now, that was me there too. Except I didn't have a single bad thought, only good ones. That's also something that doesn't exist over there. There are no bad thoughts. There is no trace of them. There is only love, bliss, an intoxication of love. And in a way, I would like to say, that increases to infinity. So it is incomprehensible to us here. Everyone rejoiced with me. Then I felt this presence, the spirit guide, who must have been standing behind me with his deep voice. He turned to me again and said, "Yes, you have the right to be here, and you can decide for yourself whether you want to stay here or not." From that moment on, I realized that I had freedom of choice, and that there was another life I could choose.
A life in the earthly.
Yes, in the earthly, exactly. But I replied, "I'm staying here because it's simply beautiful." However, he then told me that there was one more thing I had to do in this case. Well, I wanted to know what that would be. He replied that I would have to relive my entire life on earth. And that was a shock for me, I have to admit. Because at that moment, I was still a long way from my current faith, and I was terrified of having to relive my life. It's just that I've had a lot of negative experiences in my life that I've learned from. I know that today, but back then, it was all just a negative burden for me. That's why it was inconceivable for me to relive that life. That was a no-go.
You didn't want to go back to the earthly world.
I just didn't want to look at the life I had lived, because there was nothing there that I would have wanted to see from my perspective at that point. And I then asked him desperately if there was no other way. I suggested that perhaps something could be left out of this life review. I wanted to cheat my way out of it somehow. I looked for ways to avoid certain experiences and asked if that wasn't possible. And then he replied, "There is the possibility that you can go back and live your life to the end." And then I realized what this possibility meant. I can go back and live my life to the end. From that moment on, I realized again that there are people on earth who love me and who might be sad when I'm gone. That touched me too. And then it was as if it had been decided that I would return, even though I hadn't explicitly said yes to this possibility. It seemed like a done deal to me. I can't say for sure whether it was entirely my own decision.
It was also decided for you.
It seemed to me as if I had made the decision, but from today's perspective, I don't quite believe that anymore. Perhaps I was simply looking for the more comfortable way at the time, because I didn't want to experience the review and thought, okay, I'll live life to the end if I have the chance. Maybe I also thought that I could do something better than before. That could be the case, but I can't say for sure, because at the time it felt like it was a done deal that I was going back. The next moment, I thought, now I'm going back to the entrance area where I entered the light, where the light souls welcomed me. And I actually felt like I was on my way there. But then I realized that I had been given something, namely the opportunity to look around me and gain an overview. I could fly over everything, see everything from above, streets, houses, gardens, dancing souls, joyful souls. Everyone was happy, everyone was in bliss. And then I got back to the entrance area, and there I noticed something new. I heard music, soft music. And the moment I became aware of it, it went upwards in a flash, like a high-speed lift from the position I was in. I shot through a kind of I actually refused to use this word, cloud cover. But it wasn't a real cloud cover, it was a wonderful white, delicate layer that separated the upper from the lower in some way. Then I came into a kind of sky above this layer and stood there in the air, like when you stop in a lift. I had come to a halt and looked to my right and couldn't believe what I was seeing. A host of angels. From where I was to the distant horizon, I saw a huge flock of angels on the right. People often ask me what they look like. I could name a few terms now, but any words would be inadequate. They are so beautiful that there is no word for them. But they appeared human. You recognize arms, you recognize faces.
Also wings?
Yes, too, but that's not predominant. Rather, the human physical appearance predominates. There are big and small angels, but none of them looked at me. They didn't pay attention to me. I'm sure they noticed me, but I just wasn't interesting because they were all looking towards the horizon. At first, I thought to myself, where are they all looking? Can't they see me? Then I also looked in the direction they were looking. There, at the end of the horizon, a beautiful bright light could be seen. A living light that shone in all the colours and nuances you could imagine. It was not just a living brilliance, but all light came from this light. That was my immediate realization. Anyone looking into this light knew immediately that all light comes from this light, and that everything that is light is love, and that all the love I had perceived so far also comes from this light. It was the center. All the angels were focused only on this center, and all the angels sang a beautiful hallelujah, each angel individually, and yet all the angels in the choir together. This too cannot be described in words, only in its effect, bliss. You are flooded with bliss, heavenly peace and happiness. I can't put it any other way. That's what you feel when you hear and see it. It's a rush of bliss. And I could immediately recognize this light is the Lord. This certainty was immediately present in me. This is the Lord of Lords. This is Jesus Christ, the King of Kings. I could see His glory, His light. I could not look away. But at the same time, there was a moment when I asked myself, am I even allowed to see this? Is it perhaps not fair, not right, that I'm experiencing what I am seeing? I realized that I had to go back, down to the gate of light through which I had entered. I somehow had the feeling that I was seeing something forbidden. And that's why, even though this light was so overwhelming, I wanted to sneak away somehow. I then found myself on the way down to the gate of light. And when I reached the bottom of the gate, I suddenly experienced this light, which had been so far away, far on the horizon, right in front of me, directly, and it brought me to my knees. It forced me, I couldn't help it. I immediately fell to my knees and raised my right arm in front of my eyes. Just don't look in and keep a humble posture. That was all I was capable of at that moment. I couldn't have done anything else. And then this light spoke to me. And the voice was so overwhelming and so unique, like nothing I had ever heard before. It was a young voice. It was a penetrating voice that touched everything that made me, everything that I was. And it was exclusively loving, triggering only bliss. Perfect love, perfect acceptance. As you are good. And the way you are, I love you. And just as you are, I take you in my arms. And with me, you are who you are. And I want you to be who you are. That's exactly how he made me feel. And then he began to speak to me. You who are now returning to the people. He paused. And I said, yes, Lord, because I knew he meant me. And I was still on my knees with my arms in front of my eyes. And then a message came from him. One thing I want you to know. And again I said, yes, Lord. And the message was that suffering beyond all measure would come upon all of humanity. And then I said to him, that's terrible, Lord. I don't want to go back there. I'll stay with you. It's so beautiful here. I'm so happy here. Then he allowed me a pause and then conveyed the words, he who believes in me, and I could imagine that. I now knew that the Lord existed. Believing in him seemed like child's play to me. This message, he who believes in me, made me happy, euphoric. This message alone repaired everything in me that had ever been broken. It was this one moment that made me new, reborn. That made it clear. Now that I know that you really exist, I'm no longer afraid of anything anyway. This feeling of happiness overwhelmed me so much that I had to start laughing. I really burst out laughing joyfully. And at that moment, he laughed at me. It was really nice, shared joy. Then, in that moment of complete happiness, he ordered me back into my body, shot me back, I have to say. From today's perspective, that happened in a single moment. And yet, in that moment, he also gave me the certainty, I will always be with you. And then I opened my eyes when the emergency doctor slapped my cheeks left and right. I opened my eyes and the first thing I said was, I have seen the Lord. But the people around me said, no, the light, that was us with the torch. I couldn't understand what they were trying to tell me. There you are again, they said. We were very worried. You were no longer there. We had to resuscitate you. I realized that my shirt was ripped open. I felt strong and got up in one movement, fit as a fiddle. And they said, you can't get up. You need to go to hospital. You definitely have a concussion, if not more. We need to check whether you have any other wounds. But I replied, no, I'm not going with you. I'm fine. I'm perfectly healthy. And I don't live far from here, 3 blocks away. That's where I want to go now. Have a nice evening. And then I left quickly, not running, but walking quickly, because I didn't want to go to hospital under any circumstances. And that was it. Then I really went home and was intoxicated with happiness, with love. I had the feeling that I wasn't walking, but rather floating home.
Were you religiously influenced in any way during your childhood or youth, perhaps by your parents?
I grew up in a children's home, a Catholic children's home, and was brought up by nuns until the age of 5, then by secular teachers. The home consisted of 2 buildings. So yes, I was brought up as a Christian. Sunday service, Wednesday service, we were taught about Jesus, about the Bible. Faith in God and in Jesus was brought home to me.
So faith in God and Jesus was present for you from an early age.
But it was more of an obligation. It felt more like coercion. I don't know if it was like that for all children, but for me it was more of an obligation. To that extent, I was influenced by Christianity. But I didn't then lead a life on that basis. When I was 21, a doctor told me that I wouldn't live to see my 30th birthday, that I was seriously ill and that I had 5 years to live. 5 to 8 years. That really shook me up. At the age of 21, I thought life was already over. That's when I took a step back. Faith wasn't important. I wanted to enjoy life during that time. I did everything you shouldn't do. I didn't miss out on anything because I thought I didn't have any more time. If not now, then when? I really let it rip. I left the church at the age of 28. However, after 2, 3, 4 years, I realized that I was missing something without the church. I then looked for a new faith community again. That was all before the experience. I joined the new apostolic church in 2005 and attended regularly for a year, until I started going less often again. I didn't think it was necessary to go to church all the time and thought you could also believe at home.
You said that you had a good time after your diagnosis. As you were strongly influenced by the church and of course by the moral teachings of the church, did you let it rip with a guilty conscience?
There was always a guilty conscience, but after the third beer it was gone. And then 2 more shots, then there was no conscience at all. That was the case for me back then. No matter where I went, I was always very sociable. I still am today. I was also a good conversationalist. So, of course, I was also a fun factor for certain groups. There was always something going on with me, but always in connection with alcohol. I couldn't get out of myself without alcohol. I couldn't allow myself to be cheerful, to be happy, because I didn't really recognize this condition. But with alcohol, I could allow myself to do that. That was my way of being also associated with self-pity. And I actually lacked roots. What grounds a person? A child grows up with its mother, with its parents, and is thus grounded, has a firm foundation. And I lacked that in the children's home. I had no parents. I lacked any roots in my life, any sense of being rooted in something. I actually felt like a sawn-off tree that was still quite beautiful at the top, but no longer had any roots. Yes, that's one way to describe it, and that's how my life was. It was a kind of drifting life. I was successful and I also had relationships, but I wasn't happy. I only experienced feelings of happiness for a short time. For example, when I bought myself something nice. I experienced a wonderful moment and thought it was happiness. Or when you laugh a lot while intoxicated. Oh, that was fun yesterday. That was such fun, so great. When I think about it today, it has nothing to do with luck. There was nothing else for me back then, but everything has changed. This experience has put everything in a new light.
Faith too?
Everything, my entire life. I can only say that for me it's like a miracle. Because from that moment, from that experience, from the next day, I never drank alcohol again. Not a drop. I didn't even think about it. It wasn't present, as if I had never drunk. It was the same with smoking. The urge was simply no longer there.
I would like to come back to this message that you perceived. Suffering beyond all measure will come upon mankind. Why do you think you were told that?
I've always asked myself this question. Why did he say that? And what am I supposed to do with it? I couldn't talk about what I'd experienced for years anyway, because I thought that if I told anyone, they'd all think I was crazy. As far as the message is concerned, there was a big change in my life from 2009 to 2010. I developed a burning desire to make art. I said to my partner at the time, I have to do something in this direction now. I will now look for a school, a public school, an art school, and I want to learn it. What is contrast? What is light? How do colours fit together? The theory of colour, the theory of light. I learned all that at art school. And through this learning, colour theory, light, contrast, the world of shadows and everything else, something happened in 2019. On a completely normal day, the scar above my eye where I hit the oak table started to sting early in the morning, as if someone was sticking a needle into it. By the afternoon, at around 2 o'clock, I thought I had a knife stuck in my skull. The pain felt so intense. I then had to lie down. I couldn't stand it any longer because of the pain. I lay down in bed in my room, darkened the room, and as soon as I closed my eyes, the whole experience came back to me. And through my realizations at art school, my experiences with light, with shadows, with contrasts, the pictures have virtually intensified from normal to 12K. I saw everything I had experienced more clearly than ever before. And also the message you mentioned, a suffering beyond all measure will come upon all mankind, and whoever loves me, whoever believes in me, has nothing to fear. This message, in my experience, once again took center stage. That was in 2019. I then woke up, and this message, this powerful, strong message, was present to me. It drove me crazy, and I was once again intoxicated with light and love, just like back then, even more intense. 2 weeks later, the news came on TV that a virus had broken out in Wuhan. And at that moment, when I saw it on TV, when I heard the news, I felt inside me, this is where it starts.
Did you then also feel the task of leading people to Jesus?
Yes, from that moment on. That wasn't the case before. But from then on, I felt the need to tell the people around me about my experience, to share something with my fellow human beings, regardless of whether they thought I was crazy or not. But I have to talk about it now.
You sense a mission.
Yes, and from then on, I did indeed talk about it. Firstly within my family, then among all my relatives, then just everyone around me. Nobody was spared. And I still do that to this day. And it's exactly the right thing for me. It feels completely right. And today, looking back, I can also verify the message. The situation is getting worse. The conditions in the world are getting worse. The situation is not levelling off, but the problems are getting worse and worse. And that's not the end of it. They will get even worse. I'm not a prophet or anything like that, but I'm talking about my own insights that I've been given. I simply want to tell everyone, don't be afraid. No matter what comes, it can be bad and much worse. Don't be afraid. Rely completely, if you can believe, on your faith. For the Lord has said it. Whoever loves me, whoever believes in me, has nothing to fear.
Believing in Jesus, living in the spirit of Jesus, what does that mean for you in concrete terms? Is it necessary to go to church?
In concrete terms, it means that salvation, bliss, can only be achieved through faith in God. For me, that is now Jesus Christ. Everyone has to decide for themselves what they want to call it. I can only say from my experience that for me it is Jesus Christ. For me it was Jesus Christ who showed himself in his glory, not as a person, but as light and with his voice. I didn't see a face or anything like that. I only experienced the glory and his voice. True faith takes place in the heart, i.e., being in love, giving oneself to love, opening one's heart to meet other people, one's counterpart, in love and above all, thinking lovingly in spirit and acting lovingly in action. And that alone, these things are already difficult for people to manage. So that is task enough. And anyone who then manages to go to church to have fellowship with Jesus Christ, to take communion, to be in fellowship with their brothers and sisters in faith, will experience the Lord even more strongly in fellowship than if they were sitting alone in their living room at home.
You said that there was a time when you were also critical of the church. Is that no longer the case today?
If you follow Jesus, it is ultimately part of it that you enter into a community. Because the Lord already said earlier when he walked on earth, when 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I am in their midst. In other words, you need a community.
But the community does not necessarily have to meet in church.
No, it can be in the field or in a meadow.
What is the ideal path for you to cultivate this faith for yourself? Or in the midst of a church community, with all the historical and current problems that are constantly being discussed?
For sure, it's about doing it. Definitely in the personal sphere. And, if at all possible, to seek out a community of faith and to cultivate faith in the church. Because you can only receive communion and these blessings in church. And you can't get what a community can give you at home alone.
You talk about the value of communion, of the sacraments, of church togetherness in general, of the church community. Are you saying this because of your own life story, in which church life was always important? Or did you also hear this in the context of your near-death experience?
No, I haven't heard anything about that. Nothing was specifically hinted at. The experience itself was about living out of love, following the Lord Jesus Christ out of love for him, and believing in him in love. That is the real thing, the true message. Of course, it is up to each individual to decide for themselves where they practice this. Nobody in heaven told me that you have to go to church. No, that didn't happen. It was about love for the Lord. However, it is love for the Lord that gives rise to fellowship.
The better way from your point of view.
For the Lord has said, "Unite in my name. Be united among yourselves in my name." From this comes fellowship.
There is the idea that faith in Jesus alone is enough, and that, roughly speaking, it doesn't matter what kind of life you lead. What is your view? Is it ultimately about faith alone, or is the lifestyle the most important thing? A life lived in the spirit of love of neighbour, love of God?
Absolutely. Salvation comes from love for the Lord, and from love for the Lord comes love for our neighbour. And that is what life is all about, why we are here. Love your neighbour. Practice love for your neighbour. Move away from the ego, move away from selfishness, move towards the other.
The advice is therefore to live a life of love for one's neighbour, all the more in the suffering that may come. That is the central point. It is also the mission to put something into action. It's not just the mission to simply believe in Jesus and then everything will be fine.
No, that's not enough. And the suffering that comes upon people is unimaginably great. I don't want to frighten people, but to convey the good news. Whoever loves the Lord, whoever believes in him, has nothing to fear. And that comes from faith and not from anything else. It presupposes faith, of course.
You have also written a book about your experiences and insights. What can the reader expect?
I couldn't even imagine writing a book. But I had already given an interview about this experience. So many people contacted me and said they had felt grateful, they were happy, it had given them a lot. And it was only because of this that I decided to write the book, because it allows me to tell some things in more detail. For example, what my life was like before, my childhood and so on. And then also the experiences that followed the near-death experience. Everything I was allowed to experience. I can also see auras. I'm altogether clairvoyant. I pray and receive. I can work in prayer and receive what I pray for. And that is simply wonderful. There are so many things. And you can read about it in the book.
I wish you every success with your book. Thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to tell this story again. I really enjoyed it.